How did you first get connected with the Peace Camp?
Okay. I was involved in disarmament work in Ithaca when I was in school at Cornell, and I finished school in '81. I stayed on in the area and went to the Women's Pentagon Action in '82 and started working more with women as a result of that action, whereas previously had been working more with mixed groups. And I went to a FLIPA meeting, Finger Lakes Peace Alliance meeting, where I think is where I met Karen Beadle, but I had known Carolyn Mao from campus activities with KUSLAR, the Committee on U.S. Latin American Relations, and whatever else, maybe the Women's Pentagon Action. And so I went to that FLIPA meeting, and that was the first place I had heard about the Peace Camp as a possibility, and purchasing land and whatnot. And somehow there was evolution through that. I guess I was waitressing at the time and trying to figure out what I was going to be doing with my life. And at some point in time, Carolyn, maybe Karen along with her, said, you know, would you like a job being the community spokesperson, community organizer? I don't even remember the title, the PR person for the Peace Camp. And that's how I really got connected.
So when did you first go to the Peace Camp because you lived there?
I was one of the first 3 people to live there way before we opened. I think it was March, but I'm not sure. Right after we closed. Initially, I moved to Geneva so that I could be a little closer than Ithaca, and rented an apartment in Geneva before we settled on the land and had the house ready to live in. And then about simultaneously, Jody, Shad, and I moved into the house and lived there for a couple months before we opened officially.
Did you have any idea how big this was going to get?
No. I think I was 22. I had studied politics. I had been in politics since I was a kid. My parents, my family, whether it was the ties to the Communist Party or whether it was my mother's involvement in democratic and local politics, and I had been campaigning the streets of Jersey City since I was a little kid, and so I always thought I'd be involved in political work. But when I was asked if I wanted to do this, I was really unsuspecting of what was about to happen. Yeah, so my job description, from what I remember, was basically to be, the front person, to be the person who went to meetings with local town council in Romulus, to meet with people at the depot, their PR people, to meet with the press, to a certain extent, although we had no spokespeople to the press, so I often, was the conduit for that, and to meet with women in the community and community groups. So that's what I was charged to do. I had no idea how to set about doing that, but I dove in and made a lot of mistakes, but did it.
Can you tell us what a day was like for you?
The days were very long. There was the household dynamics of the 3 of us getting to know each other. Very different backgrounds, very different people. They were both older than me. They had all this experience. Jody with Michigan, Shad with life, and me with very little of either. And we liked each other a lot. I think it worked. In some strange way, it all worked. So there was that level of things happening. And I don't, you know, probably once we got a phone there and had a phone number, phone calls started coming in. But I know that I went to like scheduled meetings and then got asked questions by, the people I remember was Ray something or other, who was the head of the town council. What was his last name?
Sajak?
Yes. And the PR person at the base, whose name I don't remember. But I know that initially those were the two people who I was suddenly having to field questions from left and right. And that and press calls where, again, they were, you know, different people took them, but they would come into the phone line. And then ultimately, and that stuff went, I think, as well as it could for a 22-year-old trying to figure out, you know, what to say and how to say it the right way. And then there was the local community women's groups that I don't feel like I did a good job reaching out to, but that was part of a learning process there.
As people began to arrive at the camp, did things get harder or easier?
Oh my goodness. Well, we had the stress first of pulling everything together. I mean, we had to become a licensed New York State campground, right? So that was what Jody was really charged with, Jody and Shad. But we all pitched in different ways with stuff. So there was the stress of living there, of having this big deadline. And there were people who would come and go and help with different stuff. But when we opened, you know, thousands descended upon us. And I think the only model we had was Greenham Common, where there weren't that many women who came at one given time. But our first weekend that we opened, didn't we have like 1,000 people show up? And then in August, didn't we have like 2,000 people one weekend? So we swelled. We would have these swells. And what happened, I think, was a total change in the locus of decision making. You know, whereas we were working with upstate groups primarily and WILF for decisions around finances and press and, you know, structure and the handbook and all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden we had a lot of women, and because our process was so open, they were then involved in decision making. And so decisions that would need to get made that weekend about what actions would look like and what people were going to be doing on the land and whatnot. Like I said, the locus of control shifted. So it was a little
daunting?
Daunting. It's a great word. I use it all the time. It was a daunting experience. There were meetings. There were meetings in, you know, in Geneva. There were meetings in Ithaca. There were meetings in Binghamton, or not Binghamton, Syracuse. So yes, we went off the land. Sometimes there were meetings in the house. You know, and it was with the people in Syracuse Peace Council, FLIPA, I can't think, the coalition, yeah. So there were meetings often and everywhere, and people would come up for large organizational meetings, like from New York City, where Susan Pines from WRL and people from WILF in Philadelphia would come, and we would have those meetings. I don't remember where they took place exactly.
So by now you all had a telephone. There must have been a lot of physical work just to get the place.
Yeah, that was, Jody and Shad did a lot of that. I mean, I slept on a sleeping bag on a wood floor for months. That was it. You know, there was a bathroom, a bedroom, sometimes there were other people sleeping in it, but...
There was a bathroom?
Yeah, there was a bathroom. We didn't let people use it, but there was a bathroom upstairs. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
No.
I've never seen a bathroom in the house.
There's no indoor plumbing.
No, it was an outhouse.
I don't think so.
This is the secret we've uncovered.
Yes, we want you to reveal, where was it? We're still looking.
You were very stressed that year, Barbara.
I was very stressed. Do you think my memory's wrong? I thought we had a bathroom that we didn't let everyone use because there was plumbing, and it was Okay, we didn't have a bathroom?
No.
I lived that many months without a bathroom? I can't even imagine that. Where did I take showers? You don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I thought for sure I had a bathroom. I had a bedroom with a sleeping bag. There was no bathroom. Was there ever a bathroom?
No.
No one ever put one in?
Well, we eventually dug, you know, we had outhouses. There originally was a 2-seater outhouse. And we had porta-janes that first summer.
It's a good thing you're doing the history, not me. Yeah. I mean, I have this sense that there was, that I had some, Jody, Shad, and I protected some personal space, and there was a struggle to do that, but because we were working like 18-hour days, we needed a little bit of space. And so it might have just been the bedroom at one point after.
Yes. It
so
might
that,
have been just the room.
It might have been just the bedroom.
Yeah.
And I know when my aunt and uncle came, I moved out of the house and moved into the house they were renting for 2 weeks, just to have space.
Yeah.
And I know Jody had a tent after a while. People moved out. Yeah.
Needed to take space.
Okay, no bathroom.
Done. Had you ever been part of a women's community? Had you lived in women's community before?
No, no.
And
I mean, I shouldn't say it like that. I lived with women in a collective house for 3 of my 4 years at Cornell, and there were 4 to 5 women, 4 to 6 women at any given time. But the way I said no is like it wasn't anything like Seneca or Shad's place, or it was straight women living together, going to school, and cooking vegetarian stuff and belonging to a co-op, and so in some sense, yes, but just different.
Yeah. And had you done consensus? Well, you had been to
within the groups that I had been in. Yes.
Okay, so that was
familiar to me, but it was never with hundreds of people. That was very difficult.
Do you remember the most difficult?
Oh, sure. The flag. It was horrible. I mean, I read what someone wrote about it, and I thought, boy, that was very gentle. I mean, that whole flag episode was the most trying episode I think that we had, and we had a lot of them. Fire being thrown on the lawn and things, but that was the most divisive, and it made it very hard to figure out who you could trust, because you felt that certainly there had to be people within the group who were planted there to create division and to refocus us on internal conflict rather than on what we were set out to do. And some of those people, it was very obvious who they were. You could see them as career, what do you call those people? Agitators, right, who were employed by the government. So there was that element of that. There were the emotions that came up around the flag, the American flag, your own flag, no flag, the decision making. Evoked emotions in and of itself. So I thought the result, the decision we made in the end, was, how would I say it? It was as fabulous, as in the enormity of the response to the enormity of the problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it really was great to have all those pillowcases on the front lawn with every woman's flag. And I don't know, had we not gone through such a tumultuous process, whether we would have gotten such a great result. But that is one of my best memories, and one of my worst memories.
Did you
I remember large circles of meetings that went on well into the night, like 2 in the morning. I remember walking out at 2 in the morning and saying, I can't do this anymore. And then starting up the next day all over again. And I remember 2 women in particular, I can almost see them, I don't know who they were, who were extremely difficult and kept it going, just kept stoking the fire over, you know, the disagreements about it. So, you know, I'm not sure who came up with the idea of individual flags. I think when someone finally said, if you want the American flag, then paint it on your pillowcase. And I think that was the point at which everyone was like, okay, all right, well, if I can have my American, you know, it finally included everyone. Mm-hmm. And the theme recurred a couple of weekends before we got, because it was about July 4th, right? And so it started early on. It didn't just happen one weekend. There were a couple of weekends where
of discussing it, and
then you get new people into the decision-making process, and you'd have to revisit that. We wore through many facilitators. You know, I don't think I took any kind of leadership role. I think that a lot of times I was in awe of people who were much more experienced than I was in facilitating, in consensus making, in the movement in general. I was young. I felt young. And so a lot of times I listened and I spoke only when I felt I had something to say. So it wasn't as a leader. Yeah, I did not want to put the American flag up. I mean, that was not my flag. I still feel that way today. It's not anywhere. It doesn't fly in my house. Well, I just think it represents a division of people around the world, and I don't think that anything that accentuates that division is a helpful symbol. So I understand its purpose. I understand the benefits and why it historically came to be and why people feel proud of it. And probably in my 20s I didn't quite get all of that. But in general, I mean, there was a flag, it's probably still around, that says, what does it say? You know, the world is my flag, or what is that one? I always felt like that was my flag. It has a picture of the globe. My country is, as a woman, my country. Yeah, so it's not that I feel disrespect or hate. It doesn't bring up passionate feelings for me either way. To me, it's just another representation of governments started and run primarily by men around the world that, you know, have their nice distinct borders.
Were there ever times when you were fearful at the camp?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there were periodic little jolts, like when somebody threw fire on the front lawn or someone was getting followed back from the diner. I think a couple of times I might have felt a little scared driving at night alone. I had, you know, an old Volkswagen. If I was driving from Romulus into Ithaca or back, I felt like my car was probably known and it probably wasn't the best car. So none of us had good cars back then. So there might have been a couple moments like that, but overall living there, I didn't. And it might be just a function of youth, or it might have been a function of some sense of what we were becoming, you know, which there was a lot of strength in what we became. And the connections to Philadelphia and New York and California and Minnesota, I mean, those connections with other women, the women who sent checks to buy the farm, and that kind of gives you a security that is very different if you're alone or a small group doing something that's that locally outrageous or disliked or whatever. I mean, we were so well connected that there was, I think there was a risk to anyone who, including the military, the local police, you know, that if they touched us the wrong way, there would have been a lot of repercussions. So it was the random act that was scary, the random, you know, angry person who was acting on his own.
Do you remember much about the incident at Waterloo on the bridge?
You know, I was not part of that. I was back at the house. I mean, I was usually just in that office. That was where I was.
Right.
And so I remember people being extremely upset about that and coming back and what do we do? How do we respond to this? How do we deal with it? You know, my memory now may be different than what I experienced then. Mm-hmm. I know I experienced high levels of stress on a daily basis, but I think I triaged them. I mean, I think I was able, I didn't participate in everything by any means. Right. I eventually had an affinity group. I eventually did an action or two. I'm chained to the fence on one of those pictures. I got arrested once, maybe that was the time, but I sort of had a job that I was doing in addition, you know, and so I had this need to just kind of stay steady, and I think I struggled a lot with doing that and let a lot of stuff like that just happen. I mean, I'm sure I reacted, but I didn't always get involved in it. Well, like I said, with the media, that stuff would get farmed out. Like if people would call, I would field it and say, okay, well, you know, let me put you in touch with so-and-so in your area. You know, if we got a call from Boston, I'd redirect it to someone in Boston, a group. And I can remember, this was one of the funnier events. There was this reporter from the New York Times who originally called me, whose name I should know, but he was one of the desk writers at the New York Times for years and years and years, and he wanted to come up and interview us. Did you get told this story yet? So he wanted to come up and interview us, and the party line was only women. And he was livid. And he said, what do you mean only women? And I said, we only are doing interviews with women reporters. I said, surely, I said to him, surely there must be some women reporters at the New York Times. You know, this is a paper I grew up with. There were 2 reporters capable, who were women, of coming up to do this. And one woman photographer, well, he had to get back to his whoever, editorial board, and he didn't know if they were going to send anyone now, that it had to be a woman. I mean, we went back and forth on the phone a couple of times about this, and finally some woman calls, whoever did that article, which I do have a copy of somewhere, and she came with this reporter, and they were hysterical because they were letting us know they had to be professional, but they were letting us know that there's no way they would have gotten this assignment otherwise. It was way too big for them. You know, it was front page of the Metro section, and and they loved it. It was great. It was the greatest thing with the press. And Chris Eberlein and I did that interview, and that was really fun. Other aspects of my job, you know, I think a lot of times, I think initially it was, you know, go to this meeting, make these connections, be the person who Ray Zajac is going to call, who the Army Depot is going to call, and all summer long, those connections continued. I mean, I always spoke to the guy at the Army Depot, you know, Barb, what's going on there today, kind of stuff. But then other stuff, you know, we have to get the handbook done, can you write this section? We have to, you know, so there was always stuff happening where you had to like join in and do it with everyone else. Did other people take my job? Only in, you know, I don't know, in ways that needed to happen or philosophically needed to happen, like the interviews. Oh, I was so sick. I mean, I left with GI stuff. I left with headaches. I mean, the food was an issue. It was definitely an issue. Pizza and bagels from New York, those came up every weekend, that I remember. that was an ongoing joke with Jody and Shad and I. Whenever someone would call and they were coming up from New York, Jody would start screaming, "Bring bagels, bring pizza," and and of course it always came. And we lived off of that. I'm sure I didn't eat much protein for months. You asked for distinct memories. I have this one distinct memory of the first time I had to go to one of these town council meetings or something. And I looked at Jody and Shad and I said, "What do I wear?" And we were all laughing because, first of all, they could never have done that. They could have never shown up the way I could have shown up. And I went shopping and I bought some red knit dress with like white piping around I can remember it to this day, and sandals, right? So, and they're like doing the, "Look at Barbara, oh, you look perfect, turn around," all this funny stuff about how I was the front line, pushed me out the door. I was the 20-something going out to the meeting trying to look like, your perfect little heterosexual, PR person. But inside I felt like, what am I doing, But I managed to do it and to deal with, there was a lot of curiosity about who we are. There was a lot of confusion about what we were planning to do. I think we were constantly trying to explain ourselves and define what we were about, and oftentimes just providing information, as results in people calming down and saying, "Oh, is that all? Is that what it is?" And so I think if there was a recurrent theme about what I did, that's what it was. It was explaining what we were about, stressing that we were nonviolent. And then the question that always came was, who's behind you? Are you being supported by Russia? Are you communists? Who is behind you? And so I was always coming up against those suspicions that people had and fear that locals had about this intrusion into their world. And I think I felt, some empathy towards that, the Amish farm next door and the diner, who actually they made out quite well, but the campground down the road where you could go swimming. There were a lot of fears about what was going to happen, and I think I knew that there was going to be a lot of change as a result of what we did, just by virtue of exposure to local people, from people who are very diverse from all over the place with very diverse thoughts. And I felt, on the one hand, very sensitive about that. On the other hand, I felt like if I could just explain what we were here for, certainly people would see that and we'd be okay. And so that was how I always went in, very wide-eyed. If I just tell them why we're here, they'll get it. Maybe they won't totally agree. But I developed, very, at least on the surface, very nice relationships with a few people, including those two men that I mentioned. The one at the base, who knows, but working relationships that were not nasty in any way, shape, or form. The witch thing we had to deal with. I don't think I ever addressed it in any formal way to any group of people. No. I think stuff was written in the paper and then was responded to. You've probably seen some of that stuff. I remember addressing the witch thing, that, what a witch was, and that we weren't some satanic group of people, and that we weren't all witches, and, like not trying to deny that there were people who were witches. I can remember walking into the house one night and there was this group of crones sitting around. I'm looking at everyone going, am I in this room? do I belong here? Who are these people? You know, and it was probably people from Shad's house and someone named Aurora. Is she still around?
Yes, she is.
And Michelle. And, you know, I'm looking around going, oh my goodness. You know? But it was great to be able to be the person who would interface and say, you know, yeah, so there are witches or there are lesbians or whatever, but there are people from all over the world and all over the country coming together to do this, and the whole stressing the whole nonviolence thing. If there were any party lines, they were about diversity, they were about decentralized decision making, they were about you know, the theme of nonviolence, of women coming together. I think I was pretty set on always bringing us back to what we were here for. We were here about the missiles. We were here about disarmament. We were here about giving women a voice. And I think, you know, as I look back from a PR, you know, that's what you're supposed to do when you do PR stuff. It's like if they want to bring you to the issue of lesbians, you want to bring them back to why you're here. And I think at a young age I knew how to do that. I had the political side. I had enough role models in my life that I knew how to do that. I stayed until sometime late August when I left really sick. And I went away really sick for 2 weeks, and I came back for another short period of time in early September, and that was when the whole talk of continuing the peace camp and the arguments were going on over whether to end it or keep it going, and I left. I mean, similar to the other people in upstate New York, our intention was to create this and end it at the end of August. And I had similar feelings that we did what we wanted to do. It was enormously successful, and we were able to do it the way we wanted to do. I don't know how we did that, but we did. And the feelings, the flavor of it was changing. If it was going to stay on, there was going to be a whole transformation of what it was going to be. And I was ready at that point to let go of it. I was burnt, really burnt out, and physically sick. So.
Do you have mementos from the summer?
Do I have mementos? Oh, I have T-shirts, which unfortunately are not at my house. They're at my summer house, and so I didn't bring them. But we had a T-shirt contest this summer, and we had categories: best political, best whatever, and I had all my Seneca T-shirts.
Is there
mementos?
Any like single or kind of outstanding thing that you carried from Seneca, your summer at Seneca, into your like present life?
Oh, I think my whole present life. My decision of what to do with my life was really blossomed that summer. I mean, I had been on a, I had studied political theory, and I had been involved in politics, and I always had this kind of sideline interest in healing and alternative healing modalities, which is probably why I remember Twilight's name. And I didn't know how I was going to bring all that together, and I didn't know if I was, because part of me was ready to go to law school and be an environmental lawyer, but being at Seneca, and then my next job, which was organizing Bernie Sanders' campaign in Vermont, made me realize that I wanted to, work with women. I mean, I think I came to the conclusion at Seneca that the only way to change the world was, in a good way, was to have a stronger female weight energy, you know, that the balance was shifted and it was too male, and that personally I didn't want to spend my life fighting and learning how to argue better and burning out. I'm good at that, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to develop things that were more of a challenge to me, which was a softer healing side, a more creative side. And that was born in me at Seneca. And then I did do that campaign, but I in the process, decided to go to midwifery school and become a midwife. And so I work with women, I mean students and women, because I still deliver babies and do GYN care, and I've been doing that for 18 years. And that's all part of one-on-one changing the world, you know, by strengthening and empowering women. And it's funny, back then, I had no idea, other than having been to a home birth in Ithaca, I didn't know about babies, changing diapers, you know, I didn't know a thing. And I went to school and everyone, oh, you're going to be a midwife, you're going to deliver babies. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a midwife and I'm going to take care of women at this incredible time in their lives and help them empower themselves and teach them. And, you know, so I was always in this category with other people becoming nurse midwives, which is another element, because in Ithaca there were lay midwives and I could have done that route and whatnot. But I knew that one day I wanted to sit here and teach. I knew I wanted to have the ability to do this, so I went that route.
You must have participated in lots of circles. Do you remember any of the songs?
Oh, yeah. I do. I mean,
Did you have a favorite?
Yeah. Where are the witches?
Oh.
Who are the witches? Where do they come from? I sing that to my kids all the time. They giggle away. I'm not going to sing. You want me to sing it? It's who are the witches? Where do they come from? Maybe your great-great-grandmother was one. Witches are wise women. They say there's a little witch in every woman today.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right. Do you remember another verse in which
that went past
maybe
there?
Your great-great-grandmother was one, and if she was one, did she leave a trust fund?
Yes. You know them all.
She will share some.
Right. And then there was this Native American chant that we sang. The earth is our mother. Hey Yana, ho Yana, hey Yana. Yeah, that one I've sung with my kids too. And then my memory was jogged with the neutron bomb song, which was hysterical. And I hadn't thought of that one in a while, but those two are the ones that were my favorites.
I'd like to hear about the action that you did.
The chain gang. We were the chain gang. The only person whose name I remember was Betsy, and I don't. The person on the left in that picture of us chained to the fence, right? With the short blonde hair, although everyone I think but me had short hair. We had our affinity group, which I have to say was kind of loosely pulled together. It wasn't a true affinity group like we've been working together for months or years as an affinity group, but it was pulled together for the action. We went down, I think, late in the day. I don't think we did it early in the morning, but you know what? I don't remember that part. All I know is that we had decided that we were going to chain ourselves to the gate to symbolize, you know, the gates being closed permanently and the place being closed, and we did. And the person in the middle, who might have been an attorney, I don't know, she wore the kryptonite lock around her neck. And the rest of us had a chain weaving in and out, and I think we put a combination lock or something on the end of it. And we had a song that was based on a song like the Chain Gang, and we made up our own words. And every once in a while it comes to me. I'll write it down if I think of it and send it to you. I imagine they just cut the chains off. We went into handcuffs, that I know. I know we went into those silly little plastic handcuffs and got put in the dark on military police, you know, with MPs into jeeps and taken to some holding area on the base and questioned Jane Doe, you know, and then released. And there was no charges and no nothing. It was just a process that they did with a lot of the affinity groups. Sure. I mean, Kate Donnelly, right off the bat, was just totally amazed by. You know, there she was nursing a baby. I didn't, maybe that was telling in and of itself now that I say that. You know, she had been involved in the McGovern campaign, you know, so were my parents, Vietnam, you know, when I met her, I just thought, this is a mentor. This is someone I really like. I mean, I had a great sense from her that I could trust her, that she was a really clear thinker. So she was a mentor to me. Susan Pines was too, although I didn't get a lot of time with her, and I was a little intimidated by her. Is she still around? Is she in New York? Is she? Yeah. Vera Williams, the artist who did our logo and our shirt and who's written children's books. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know the name.
Yeah. She came to the camp a few times and was part of the original meetings, and she did that big blue and gold painting that of the suns, moons,
okay.
the 4 sections. Yeah, that was her. And I remember just meeting her and thinking, wow, look what this woman does with her life, you know. And she painted and she wrote children's books, and she was involved in all this wonderful women's movement, disarmament stuff. Those are people off the top of my head who stand out. I mean, I would, you know, and of course, Jody and Chad. I mean, we worked shoulder to shoulder for months. I mean, how could you not totally love what they were capable of? And I mean, they were amazing. The biggest mistake I made was with the local women who were involved in the whole historic stuff around Seneca Falls. I didn't reach out to them. And I didn't know, like, somewhere it was on my list to do, but I didn't have a concept of how important that was. And it was a mistake because they felt it and it came back at us. Like, how could you be here? You know, they were slightly old, you know, they were probably in their 30s or something, and older. Ancient to me. And they, you know, they felt miffed. Like, how could we have arrived and not been in touch with them and asked them? So we tried to, you know, patch that up, and there was one woman whose name I don't remember who made the bridge, you know, who let us know that we really should come. And eventually I went to wherever they had a space and talked to them. But that was a huge mistake in my, you know, own evaluation of myself. I mean, things just kept happening. You know, you were constantly dealing with stuff. So, you know, I'm sure it was something that we had talked about doing, just like going to town council meetings in a dress was something we talked about doing. Let's get Mikey to go. But, you know, I mean, I think there was just diversity everywhere, and that's who I was. But the joke between me and Jody and Chad was almost like, let's get Mikey to go. Barbara, you go. You know. I mean, Jody wouldn't have anything to do with talking publicly to people. That was not what she was going to do. No. You know, I think that those of us from the upstate area at the time felt really ready to let go when we couldn't close it. I know I felt that way. I know I felt really unhappy, probably angry at times that the transition was taking place to some vision that we didn't have for it when we raised the money and set the place up, and that we were much more comfortable with turning it over to local Native Americans or local people in general. And there was a real discomfort that I had about what was it going to become and how would that change its image in history. You know, how would that really change it? And feeling like, you know, I had to let go of it because I wasn't going to stay and be a part of that. And it wasn't that I particularly disliked anyone or anything. It's just that to me, it was very defined in what we were setting up and doing. And now it was going to go off and become whatever anyone who happened to be living there at the time decided they wanted it to be. And that's what I wasn't comfortable with, because I knew, dealing with groups all through the summer, how things could totally change depending upon the group. So there was a little, discomfort with that. And the people who I had worked together with, we just went geographically to different places. And then when I went and did electoral politics in Vermont, there wasn't anyone there who I had worked with before, and then I trucked off with a boyfriend to California and decided to become a midwife, and so it was just another new world. I know who I did for years, actually. Andrea Rudner. Oh. And I stayed friends for quite a while, because I moved to Manhattan to go to nursing school. So we stayed friends for a bunch of years, and she was involved with the peace camp after it ended. She stayed on for a while and went back and forth for a few years, didn't she? Because I think I got my information from her. And Kate Donnelly, every once in a blue moon, or Clay and I will, be in touch with each other, but not in a few years now. Not in that way. I mean, have I done civil disobedience? No. Have I gone to some protests here and there? Yes. Do I consider myself political? Absolutely. But with the midwifery, one of the ways in which I've done that is I got very involved just before I had kids in state issues around reimbursement for midwives and restraint of trade issues, and then regulatory issues that governed our practice and governed the practice of lay midwives, and kind of brought in lay midwives into play in New Jersey. And then since I had kids 12 years ago, I've been I've been really limiting how much I do beyond my work as a midwife and teacher and my kids, because just can't do it all. You can't do it all. And I know that when they go off to college, I'll have more time. My husband's very involved in politics, so we just, it's hard to do all that in one house and give attention to 3 kids. But it's not gone. It's not gone at all. And I feel like my work is deeply political. What I teach, when I teach, it's never just skills. It's all in a huge political context. In fact, our program here is known because we have a public policy component to it. This program, when you look at the 40 other programs in the country, is known because of its political aspects and because of its public policy orientation. We drag students down to Washington. We teach them how to lobby. We get them involved in state political stuff. But in the day-to-day care of patients, of clients, of women, whether it's GYN stuff or 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night, what I'm doing is definitely political. My daughter, I talked to her about it. I mean, they certainly know they live in a political household. There's no question. They certainly know that we're different than all our neighbors. Our best friends are lesbians, we go to a Unitarian church, everything about us is a little different than everyone else. And so over time we've shared with them, bits and pieces. So last night I was talking to my daughter about this interview, and she was kind of asking me, well, what did you do? But at the right time. She's not 12 yet, and she's, it was very hard for her when I wouldn't take her photograph with the wax figure of George Bush in New York a couple weeks ago. She said, Mom, I want my picture with the president, because we're in the wax museum. I said, nope. I said, you can go take it with Hillary. She's like, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, I'm not taking it. Why? And so then you have to explain, I really don't want to take a picture of you with that man. So they know. The boys are a little young. I have twin boys who are 9, and but they get it. They're all like, you know, they know as they grow up, they can be gay, they can be straight, they can be married, they can be not. My daughter, I think she was 5, and she was swinging on a swing. She gets this big smile on her face, and she goes, "When I grow up, I'm going to have a partner." And it was the greatest thing. Now she would like to wear Prada, but I'm assuming this is an aberration of the teenage years. And that when she gets older, she'll come back around. I'm going to have a partner. She lit up from, you know, just ear to ear. And I felt like, I've done it. I've been a successful mother already. You know, I think like in so many things that we all try to do, it is so hard to kind of cross that divide and involve more and more people of color in things, or have it be such that they feel welcome, or whatever it is. Neither of those terms are right for describing it. We weren't. The groups that were pulling it all together were white women. That's who we were. And I think although our handbook, you know, had its credo of accepting everyone, and it just, you know, just wasn't. I'm not sure how we could have done things differently. We struggle with that here today at the university level. How do you do things differently so that you have a more diverse student population, so that you have more midwives of color? How, you know, I don't have any answers to what we could have done differently. I think there was a lot happening in the cities. I think maybe asking people who are organizing in the cities if they have any kind of self-reflection on that, how that could have been different. But, you know, were the issues of Pershing II and cruise missiles the issues of women of color, you know, throughout the country? Maybe just not. Not in high numbers anyway. Affluent, educated. That's who we were. Privileged.
Did Seneca make a difference?
In the world? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that it gave such strength to so many people who were involved in the disarmament movement and the feminist movement at the time, on an individual basis. And I think those people took that back to their work and their homes, and I think it changed people's lives dramatically. You know, in the big picture of social change, you know, did it affect the government? Well, it certainly did on a local level. You know, it affected both politics locally in terms of town council and, you know, everything that was going on there, but it affected the people at the base in terms of how penetrable the place was, I mean, we got to the Q zone and hung out there. You know, we got into the water tower and painted it in the middle of the night. I mean, it made a farce out of their idea of security, and that was something that I think resounded way beyond Seneca County, New York. I think that went right back to Washington. It was an embarrassment. How could these women do this? And what I loved about it was how playfully we did it, and how it was nonviolent, and it was creative with yarn and paint and whatever else we used. Our spider webs and everything. Witches' brooms. Everything. So, I absolutely think it was really pretty big. You know, did it change the course of history? Well, we still have nuclear weapons, and we still, you know. So no, not in that regard. But change is slow. You know, I think a lot of the younger people just, it's taken for granted. It's what their mothers did or lived through, or, you know, there's certain things that are just assumed they've always been this way. You know, a woman getting to go to college, getting to, you know, be a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, that's all just assumed that it's been that way for a very long time. The wonderful thing about teaching is that you can take the time to lay out, like, history for students. So, for example, when we talk about abortion and we talk about choice, we're working with a group of women who would never think that they had anything but choice. And they realize that somewhere out there, you know, male politicians are, you know, trying to take that away, or politicians in general. But they don't have that perspective of, you know, women were dying because of back alley abortions, because it just isn't at all part of their reality. And I think sometimes you need things to swing to an extreme place, I think all the time, before people react and jump in and try to bring it back. So the beauty of teaching is that you can lay out history and change and try to give people insight into what might be coming next. And then we have some very enlightened students who, you know, are right there with us. But, you know, I teach every year about childbirth education and the childbirth movement. Well, the recognition that there's a movement, it was a movement, isn't even clear to a lot of people. When I tell them that men had to have certificates of having gone to classes in order to go to the labor room to see their baby be born, they're like hysterical, laughing, because how could that be? But that was my mother and father. So teaching's a wonderful tool. It's just wonderful.
Do you have anything that we didn't ask questions about that you'd like to talk about?
You know, I just wish I could remember more. You know, I really wish I could remember more. I remember, you know, the men at Seneca. I remember on a personal level, I had a boyfriend at the time who had really got me involved in, like, who did actions at Shoreham nuclear power plant and had gotten me very interested and involved in all this political anti-nuclear stuff, and who felt so hurt. I mean, he and Jody had it out once about how far he could cross on the line on the land. And I remember and Clay Colton, I remember feeling like, you know, on the one hand, just deal with it, guys. You know, this is like one summer, you know, you have your own shows, you don't need to, you know. And on the other hand, I remember feeling like, okay, you know, how does this really fit in this whole big philosophy of we are all one? And then my uncle came, who at the time was in his 70s, and he's the person who was Communist Party organizer. And he was totally okay with it and started a men's group, you know, and he snatched up all these men and, you know, started like these men's, not affinity groups, but like, let's process this, we're going to meet over at this other campground and we're going to see what we can do for support. And so I remember always watching and being sensitive to all that and having mixed emotions and thoughts about it. Well, it was, you know, it was such a big thing that all the guys who were players in the movement in the area at the time had to have been jealous. You know, how could they not be part of this huge thing that we were doing? And trying to figure out a role to support us. Well, there were a lot of us who didn't want any support from men. No way, you know. So there was, you know, so what do you do with that when you're in those two worlds? But overall, it didn't deter me from anything. It was just something that I was sensitive to. Oh, here's the directions. Orientation information. I wrote a lot of this. I might have written the whole thing, but I certainly...
So you and Chris were local outreach and finance.
Well, Chris was finance more than anything. I didn't do finance.
Yeah.
Betsy Hopkirk, that was, and Denise Shirley. Okay, they were my roommates in Geneva. I moved in with them. Oh, Amy in New York. Oh my goodness. Leanne
how
Irwin
easy
and
it is to
Nancy
have a
Alec,
memory.
I remember them all very well. But I might have written this, or at least a section of it, a few sections of it. Yeah. Yeah, not the whole thing. We split up work pretty well. You know, I don't think I'm romanticizing my memories to say that we worked incredibly well with each other from all the different paths that we came from and all the different locations. I mean, I think on the weekends that was the biggest challenge because it was transient. There were so many people.
Yeah.
But the ongoing core group of groups that made decisions, that had those regional meetings, you know, we had great facilitators and we had people, you know, we worked pretty well. I mean, I don't remember major egos. Like now when I look at groups, I look at them and I think, who are the egos in this group? You know? But I don't remember that being huge. There were a few, but not huge. Wasn't this where we had the all-night meetings? Meetings that went on forever with some structure? I know her, but who is she? Grandniece of Susan. Yeah. That's her name. She has her name.
It is, okay.
So she was probably one of the people that I was supposed to outreach to. Oh no, I haven't seen any of this stuff. I remember when we were at the Castro's and realized that Grenada had been bombed. Or not bombed. What had happened?
Yeah,
we invaded Grenada. And I remember we all freaked out. Oh, we all got really emotional. It was on the TV, and we went back to the camp and like, what's our response going to be? And we like suddenly had all these meetings and like, how could we respond to this? And this was outrageous and blah, 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 blah. And I think people went off to protest in D.C. or you know, there were things that came out of that didn't happen right there. I remember, you know, looking up under those shields and talking to those men, and the ones who would move their eyes and look down at you and just kind of let you know that they were okay. You know, I felt like we were pretty accurate with what we knew about what was going on, and from the onset, you know, it was clear they were going to take us seriously. Our phone lines were tapped from the beginning. I used to just talk to them on the phone. I did. Because, you know, we'd be there in the house and you pick up the phone and click, 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 and I'd be like, hey guys, how you doing today? Say hi to so-and-so for me. Yeah, and then make the phone call. And you knew they were listening the whole time. I mean, but what was there to hide? There was really nothing to hide. I mean, things that affinity groups did, fortunately, were surprises because that's the beauty of affinity groups. There's my dog. She lived to be 16. And this is Betsy, Hobkirk,
Murph, Hazel.
Hazel. I don't remember her. And that's me. Yeah.
Oh, that's
What does it say?
conversion.
Conversion. Oh, that was one of the things that we haven't talked about. That we talked a lot about in FLIPA and in the local meetings was what did we want to see happen to the Army Depot after it closed? And I mean, because we didn't, you know, we wanted to give the community alternatives to an Army base, and we wanted to answer the really hard questions of employment and economics in the area. And so we did a lot of talking and thinking about conversion and what it could become. And, you know, that was probably linked to that whole idea of, you know, if the peace camp is going to stay here, if women are going to be working on it, are they going to work on these themes that were so important to us in starting it, that we felt were incredibly sensitive to the local area before we came to it? And I think the feeling was, no, it's taken on a different life of its own. It's become a sacred space for women, for personal transformation, for healing, for peace, in politics, but different than this focus that we had upstate about addressing local concerns about the base.
Mm-hmm.
No, well, there was a one before it, I think out of San Luis Obispo. I think that was the one that came before it. That was a fabulous handbook as well. That was anarchist originally, and then we did this one, and this was just, I think we were amazed by it. Yeah, it was really important for us to put this about the Cayuga Nation and the locale and the feminism in Seneca. But I can't tell you how frantic the process was to get this thing written.
I'm sure.
You got to write a section on this. We got to do that. We got to, you know. Yeah. So anyway, well, thanks for the memories. I am very interested now and look really forward to reading what people say who were there in the years afterwards. I assume you're interviewing beyond 83, right?
Definitely we will.
And I'm just really curious to know about especially those first couple years of transformation, what people, what
worked
it was
on
for
and
people,
how,
and what they worked on.
Right, okay.
And if they ever put a
Eventually.
bathroom in.
No. The bathroom never.
Or if why they never discovered the one that I used.
Every single year.